When I was a kid, my mom told me that I was the most handsome boy in the world. But then, every year someone else wins the most handsome man in the world competition through popular media. I've had to do some unlearning. Maybe I was the most handsome in my mother's eyes. Or maybe she was just trying to give me some self confidence as a youth. Learning, unlearning, and learning again.
Let's get ready for our own learning and unlearning. In our last video, we hit on self-care. It's an integral, crucial part of equity work. We discussed the strategy of it, why it is so intertwined in the work. We considered some more specifics of finding a variety of ways to take care of ourselves, knowing sometimes we're pressed for time, money, or focus, and there are different self-care methods to match where we're at. We also reflected on how we owe it to ourselves to hold self-love. With this key ingredient to keep us moving forward, we can move on to another theme that does the same. Learning. I don't think we need to spend too much time as we already know this one pretty well. We learn at school, at work, in our day-to-day lives. We learn what we agree with and what we disagree with. If nothing else, there's value in learning what we disagree with because then we are less confused, less surprised when we do come across said differences. We learn both what affirms us and what challenges us. We don't have to accept all compliments, bend all critiques. It's still good to be aware of both. When it comes to learning about equity, discomfort is good. It's a positive sign. We should be uncomfortable with prejudice. We should be concerned when we realize there are problems in our own communities, organizations, with our individual work. Discomfort is our compass. In essence, learning about equity is like anything else, whether it is community outreach, a CDL to drive a big snowplow, COBRA and other HR laws. If we can learn any of these or other local government functions, we can learn about equity and justice too. Let's get into unlearning, just as and sometimes even more important. We naturally resist new information that contradicts our current assumptions, beliefs, and perceptions. Think of it like this. We look at the day's weather and it says clear skies, and then by afternoon it snows. We have that moment of disbelief, annoyance, say, wait a second, I didn't bring my coat to work today. When we learn new things in a vacuum, in areas that we know nothing about, we tend to be more open. For those areas we already feel we know more about, especially areas we think we know a lot in, such as our profession, we have to be willing to reinterpret, revise, even let go of what we once thought was right or true. And that's all good. To do so, it's much easier if we can identify the source of our resistance, weigh it, and think of how important it really is to us, and make our choice to accept and internalize any new information or not. There are reasons not to take in new information, in our case about how we can be more equitable in local government. There's pride and our sense of self we want to hold on to. Nostalgia, to preserve our positive feelings about the past. There's personal benefit and gain. I've mentioned a few times in the series that challenging the status quo, not accepting it, can and will have pushback. There's comfort too. I can say that discomfort is a compass, and it can still be difficult to follow. For many of us, there's the need to be correct, always that push to have to win the debate, or at least not let the other person win. Competitiveness. Social status and acceptance. We want to fit in, want to be accepted, and in many circles that means to conform. Power and influence can be at risk. Although there's ways to grow and spread power, to a certain degree we are sharing some of our influence with others. Identify what among these, or outside of the list, is the root of our personal resistance and decide if it's worth it to push back against certain elements of equity and inclusion, or to let it sink in. Some examples for us. By learning that many highway routes through cities were weaponized and intentionally used to disrupt and split minority neighborhoods, means we have to unlearn notions that roads are always about getting from point A to point B in the fastest way we can. By learning that school funding, predominantly based in property taxes, has evolved as a newer, lawful, less publicly controversial form of separate but equal, we have to unlearn the notion that good public education is accessible to all. By learning about the history of national parks, barring certain populations and the woods being used as places of crimes against them, we have to unlearn the natural appeal of such places to all. By learning more about redlining and how these maps can be reflected in the census today even after it was made illegal, we have to unlearn that changing the laws alone is sufficient. When we learn how many labor disputes in American history resulted in gunfights and deaths between workers and police, we have to unlearn the idea that law enforcement has always protected and served the common person. One example I really appreciate is from the city of Durango. In 2020, their Community Relations Department made an intentional, organized effort to renew connections and build new bridges across the city. Groups included the mayor, police department, Creative Economy Commission, and school board. This is an example of learning about others, and in turn, others learning about us. I've mentioned before that if we want to learn about other groups and peoples, no better place than the source. There's a good chance if we're going to start promoting equity, like Durango, meeting multiple stakeholders and learning about them will be a part of it. Our optional exercise is a learning plan. This is a callback to our internal barriers discussion. If feeling like we don't know enough is holding us back, now is a great opportunity to start listing out what we can learn. For going advanced, we can be proactive in identifying our mainstream beliefs. It's not just pausing and reflecting when we come across that new bit of information that rattles us, that we have a hard time accepting. It's really looking at what our mainstream beliefs are now. We can start with the lessons we've already covered in this series. We can start with what might concern us in the topics coming up. We can even just think, hey, what are some common ideas that I happen to agree with? And make a point to list it down or make a mental note. It helps make the learning and unlearning process more seamless. Up next, we go to a similar but distinct theme of knowledge.